Welcome back. It's time for another episode of the Screen Sermon Podcast. This is Brandon, your host, and I'm sitting here this week with Cody.
Hey y'all.
Cody, I'm excited to kind of step back into Rajamouli. We spoke about RRR a few weeks ago and got quite a nice turnout in terms of listeners and folks that were interacting with us on YouTube, and it was really excellent. And so I'm hoping that us taking the opportunity to, we got a suggestion from a fan to check out these other Rajamouli films, specifically Baahubali and Baahubali 2. And so we decided to do them one at a time, and we'll kind of split them up by a couple of weeks, and just to see, how we feel about them and comparing them to RRR and the styling that's coming out of Indian cinema. And so that's what Cody and I are here to do today. Very quickly, before we get started, I do want to just point out that having those opportunities to interact with people who are listening to the show was amazing, and it's something that I'm very much looking forward to having happen more. And so, if you're listening to the show, please absolutely send us any kind of feedback or suggestions, and we will work suggestions into the show. Right now, we're building the calendar just based on what makes sense to us. So we want to hear from folks. You can reach us at screensermonpod@gmail.com. Again, that's screensermonpod@gmail.com. You can search for at Screen Sermon on YouTube, on Instagram, on TikTok, and on Twitter, and of course the Screen Sermon Podcast on Facebook. So find us somewhere, like and subscribe, follow, what have you. We would love to hear from you, and we would love to be able to synthesize your feedback for us into future episodes. So please do. So Code, thanks again for joining me. I feel like you and I are kind of on a roll, that you and I end up doing quite a few of these together, which is nice. So we're back into cinema coming from the country of India, and this week we're talking about Baahubali, the beginning. So the first film. It was released in 2015, and you want to just kind of give me a gloss over, knee-jerk reaction. How did you find it?
First thing to say, I guess, would be it really grew on me. Again, go back a few episodes to hear what we thought about RRR, but both of our reviews of that one were pretty glowing all around. This one, I will say, it didn't hit me quite as hard from the start, but as I said, it was a steady upward. I mean, fittingly enough, considering the beginning of this guy's journey, it was a steady upward climb of just my general enjoyment and appreciation of the filmmaking, and as well as the cast. So by the end, I was just so fired up for the second one.
I agree. I essentially had the same reaction, in that I was entertained enough in the beginning, but I wasn't as invested. RRR kind of grabs you immediately when you get the introductory segments to the two principal characters, and this didn't have that same kind of flavor to it. Not quite. You still get some great fantastical abilities and imagery, but it's just not quite ramped up to 11 like it was in RRR. And so I agree with you. It kind of had a slow start, and I was fine with it, but I wasn't exactly clicking. And then I really think when the film hits into the third act, or right before the film goes into the third act, I kind of I went all in, and then it leaves you on the cliffhanger, which we'll get to later, that I was like, oh man, well now I gotta see,
Yes. Who knew there was a second one after one called The Beginning?
Yeah, they really queued that one up for us.
Yeah, right. Well, I will say too, just kind of by nature of the story or the structure of it, I think I didn't know how else you could keep people in that hard into this character, since there's so little we know about him. There's so little he knows about himself in the beginning. It really felt like a big self-discovery kind of a journey. Kind of cool too, in that the climax actually takes us back a step.
Yeah, that was unexpected. It felt like it was kind of ramping up to what I thought was going to be the end. And then all of a sudden we get cut back into this flashback, and the flashback is literally the last 45 minutes to an hour, maybe.
Yeah, it felt like it could have been its own movie.
Yeah. Yeah, 100%. And that's when it really kind of started going full throttle for me, because you get full blown just war action scenes and all in all just general badassery, and it's pretty nonstop too. Once it gets going, it's pretty much just a nonstop action scene, one thing after another. Kind of like watching a Jason Statham movie, just one thing after the other.
Oh no, absolutely. It was just full on like Pelennor Fields by the end there. Like just like like piece after piece, like a multi-layered battle, like a very thick cake. And
Yeah,
and as much as I was enjoying everything up to that point, I realized most of what I had to say, or at least really stuck with me memory-wise, was in that last 45 to an hour you're talking about.
I think one of the things that was great about it is it's kind of building up this, essentially this heavyweight title fight, right? And you get these intros to Shiva. They effectively call him Shiva throughout most of the film, although I think that's a nickname. He's, I mean, immediately depicted as having what we are now learning in our beginning with Indian cinema is a lot of times their protagonists, their action heroes, have pretty much supernatural powers. He has incredible physical strength. He has endurance and constitution. Like, you is absolutely impossible trying to scale up this enormous waterfall, and he falls from over 100 feet, and he's done it over 100 times, yet he's sustained no injuries and things like that. And they even give you a shot of him failing to get up the waterfall, and it's just like the easy breezy like water slide on his way down. It's no big deal. And so that, coupled with the big heel, or his kind of counterpart, and I'm trying to find his name because I had it written down a lot, Balaladeva. And he's the king, and his introductory scene pretty much is him wrestling with a water buffalo or something like that, and he's able to overpower and subdue this thing single-handedly, while 8 or 10 of his men are getting thrown around by it while they're trying to corral it and things like that.
Oh no, you hit it on the head, man. This is like where you see both the dudes back at their gym just pumping iron. But I know, I'm so glad you mentioned the water buffalo scene, because it was the first of a few scenes I noticed something I'd never seen in a movie before. If you looked, this may have just been on the version I watched, but down in the bottom left, when that would happen with a certain CG animal, they would make sure to let you know it was CGI with this little tag down there.
Huh.
I don't know if that was on your version.
Not that I noticed. I saw the text at the beginning of the film that very clearly states no animals were harmed in the making. Mm-hmm. I don't recall seeing it in the scenes themselves.
Yeah, it was weird to me too, because I clocked that at first, and I'm like, oh, that must be one more reassurance. Like, we're not actually... And I love that they think that their actor might actually just go tangle with a full-on bison, and could just throw him around like he's, like Brock Lesnar or something. But the weird part to me, though, is like I saw it another few times, but then I was starting to note like each animal sequence, and obviously some that you're just riding a horse or something, or just hanging out with him. But then there were some where I was like, wow, that dude just fell right off that horse, or there was like animals flying off in the distance because of some kind of explosion or something, and I was like, why wasn't the CGI there? Then I started worrying, like, were those real horses? Like, goddamn. So I haven't found anything on that, but I'm super curious as to why they had those little tags on there.
Yeah, I'm surprised if they were there. I'm surprised that I missed it, because I was certainly dialed into the film. I even came in and sat down here in the studio to watch it, because it's just you're sitting upright in a chair with the monitor right in front of your face, and I never noticed anything. I'm definitely going to be watching now anytime there's animals on screen.
Well, and speaking of the language barrier as well, I know I watched all of about 2 scenes of this, not realizing that I had the English dub. And disclaimer, I realize that voice acting is a super difficult thing, especially trying to match something of a very different language. That being said, I saw RRR as the English dub, and I thought they did a fine job. It also, to me, sounded like folks that maybe knew possibly Telugu originally, and also knew English.
Okay.
As opposed to somebody just slapping English on top, which the English dub for this one definitely felt that way.
I see.
This was like some mid-90s anime kind of performance, you know?
I'm so glad you brought up anime, actually. I got to get back to that in a second. I was just going to say, most of the time when we're watching international film of some kind, or when I'm watching international film of some kind, I don't want to put that on anybody else, I have to watch the sub version, and I think it's just because the matching problem with the mouths and then what's being said. Obviously, the issue that you run into is the same issue that we ran into with RRR, which is even though the kind of default version of the film is in Hindi, they weren't speaking Hindi when they made the movie. And so it still doesn't match up. But yeah, I started with it and I just stuck with it. And based on your review of the voice acting for the English dub, it sounds like I made a good choice.
I would say so. There was just that, maybe the first scene even, of when she's holding the baby up in the river and somebody started speaking, like, oh, look, there's a, I forget what the line was, like just noticing that there was a baby, just out there, which I love that shot. I mean, is not great as some of the CG was in those opening scenes and stuff like that, but just, I can see why they made it the cover image of her just holding this thing up as she's like in the midst of a river. But that first person that called from the bank, from the village and everything, I was like, okay, yeah, switching to subtitle right now.
Yeah, that's really a provocative image that they use. I guess that was the poster, like the theatrical poster, and a lot of the promotional imagery and stuff.
Yeah, from what I understand too, it was the bit from the old Hindu epic that had inspired Rajamouli to make this movie. Speaking of, I got very curious about that, reading a couple of things about this before I started watching it. And hold on, I'm gonna have to find the exact title of this. Yeah, okay, it's called the pardon my pronunciation here, but Mahabharata. Mahabharata, something in that range. Was kind of curious. There's a story within there that I had heard of before, and I was like, yeah, maybe I'll check this out. Maybe I could read this in anticipation of watching these two movies, and found out it's about 13,000 pages.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah, not a quick read between podcast episodes. I would need like probably a whole course on this epic.
It's like all of George R.R. Martin's writings.
It's like all of Robert Jordan's combined.
Getting back to the anime thing, I'm glad that you said just name dropped anime, and the reason why is, as I mentioned last time, I'm starting to take notes in these weird little cells like style, cinematography, writing, performance, stuff like that. Baahubali is thick with style. Let's put that out there. I would say, based on my very small sample size, Indian cinema in general is thick with style from what I've noticed. And one of the things that I thought that they did in this film, whether it was intentional or not, I felt like there was some anime influence in here. There was certainly some very anime-looking action scenes going on, specifically during the flashback scene, when the Kalakayans are, en masse, basically, and Baahubali himself is running through the crowd and just kind of slashing guys as he passes by. But it was very anime looking in that he looked like he was moving at super speed, first of all, and second of all, he's slashing guys left and right with a reverse grip on his sword, and he never stops moving. Like, it's just this constant running zigzag pattern, slashing guys up. Just reminded me of watching, Rurouni Kenshin or something like that. And then the other one that I got was when Baahubali is fighting the Kalakayan chief, and the dude just starts tossing underlings at him, and he ends up getting buried under 10 or 12 guys. And then Baahubali goes full Kaioken times 4 and blasts them all off of himself at the same time, and they go flying in the air.
That was one of my favorite moments in the whole thing, was when the Kalakayan chief starts. Yeah, he's not just throwing like Bahubali's men at him. You know what I mean? He's throwing his men too. Anybody that's nearby, he's just throwing them. Like he's trying to do that, like that basketball game that you have in the arcade. He's just like running everything on them.
And they even do the thing where
I'm glad you brought up the Kalakayans, if I'm saying that right, because as I said, my kind of interest, including in some of the main characters, really ramped up towards that last battle, and I was really feeling OG Bahubali. That is until the Kalakaans showed up, and then at that point, the 13-year-old edgelord in me like took over, because the guys wearing all black, real dirty, messed up hair that have like their mascots like a big spider skeleton.
Yeah,
which I want that shit on a shirt. That thing looked amazing. And then suddenly I was like a little bit more tense on this battle, because I'm like, damn, I love that guy, but also these guys look cool as shit.
They really do. And evidently, that language that they're speaking was created for them from scratch.
I read that. Yeah, they actually had somebody, like a linguist of some sort, come up with that.
And I didn't have any subtitles for it, so I had no clue what they were saying.
Yeah, I thought mine had, like my TV or Netflix or something had kind of gone out, but it was the same on mine as well. And that's why they had the guy they had met in the like the kind of bar/bazaar kind of place, the trader or whatever, kind of translating for them.
Oh, another thing that I had written down about the Kalakaans, when I was first trying to figure out what the hell they were supposed to be, immediately I thought of the Klingons from the old Star Trek movies.
Mm-hmm.
They just read as Klingons, like they should have flown in on a warbird. You know, they should have been fighting Bahubali's men with bat lifts, like the whole thing. And then they also reminded me of Mongols, and it just seemed to be this like weird blend of Klingon Mongols, and then they spoke their own language, but I wasn't getting any kind of subtitles. And but yeah, I just ended up feeling like they're just some badass faction, you know, from somewhere else, you know, trying to take over Mashmati. So it was the third. I agree with you in that all the really cool stuff seems to ramp up into that third act when you're doing the flashback. And I also agree with you. I think OG Bahubali is just so much more interesting than Shiva, who is the, you know, protagonist of the story, unfortunately. But hopefully he'll kind of redeem himself more in the second movie.
Yeah, I mean, I think now, especially with I mean, I won't spoil it, but like the way the cliffhanger landed and everything you learned through that flashback as well, like it almost felt a little bit like Superman to me. You know what I mean? Mm-hmm. You know, young Clark Kent, if I remember right. I mean, I know there's probably 14 different versions of this backstory, but he doesn't quite know what he is. He knows he's fast. He has some of these powers and all that, and it's sometime later that he learns that he had landed, and then. Even later, if I remember right, he learns more about Krypton and his father and all that, you know?
Yeah.
And I mean, heck, going back to anime a little bit, Goku has that as well. He thought he was just, you know, this child from the jungle, you know, that happened to have a tail. Then much later learns that he's actually part of this crazy alien race.
That's an excellent point. Yeah, I mean, he's very aimless when you first meet him. He seems to be well-intentioned. He seems to be he's a good person. You can tell he's a good person, but he just seems lazy, or he seems like he just doesn't know what he is or what he's supposed to be doing. You know, his mom, who we of course know later, as we come to find later on, is actually his adoptive mother, is fretting over him and his unnatural pull toward this waterfall, and wants him to stop trying to scale it. And so she's trying to perform this ritual that will get essentially force Shiva to force her son to listen to her. And the sage is telling her she has to pour 116 buckets of water over the lingam, which I looked up, which is essentially an abstract representation of Shiva, or their god. And he ends up literally just ripping it up out of the ground, basically with his bare hands, and carrying it across the river so that he can position it under a waterfall so that it's constantly being bathed in water, so that his mom doesn't have to fret over it. And of course this must be just highly sacrilegious, but he just seems like carefree. He doesn't really have much of a bother or care in the world, and he's got these incredible abilities that nobody else seems to have, but he just doesn't seem to have a purpose behind them.
Yeah, he's definitely, what do you call that? Kind of the diamond in the rough, if you will, I guess. You know what I mean? Has a hell of a lot of potential and natural gifts, and is not too sure yet of what he's to do with them, but also immediately feels this intense passion, or I guess kind of calling, up the side of that mountain.
And they never explained that, right? They never really explained why he felt the pull to do that.
Well, I mean, I figured it was just kind of in his blood, so to speak. You know what I mean? Like it's he's of a rare and gifted stock, so to speak. You know what I mean? And I just took it as that he was being called back to where he was needed.
That makes sense. And so, of course, he eventually finds the appropriate motivation. He gets the mask, or the mask kind of comes to him. It's a wooden mask, and has the vague feminine shape to it. And so he's kind of driven to get up the waterfall and see what's up there. And this attempt works out for him, and he does some pretty wild stuff with a bow and arrow and some vines that he rips off of some trees on his way up and things like that. He manages to make shoots the arrow through a tree in order to anchor himself and pulls himself up, only for him to find this kind of lady of the waterfall who he immediately falls in love with. Like there's no need to build a relationship here. It's just like it clicks, and he just knows that this is his destiny, kind of thing.
Yeah, and what a reveal too to that character. I mean, you show up with just flocked by blue butterflies. I mean, right by a waterfall. Like, damn. I'll be honest, I wasn't too far from falling in love with her myself, but.
And then of course we get a dance number, a musical number, which, as we know, are common. And I have really different feelings about musical numbers now in these films from India. Stop me if this doesn't make any sense. To me, they seem like vignettes. That's what these feel like to me. It feels like the current time that the film is taking place in pauses a little bit, and then we get an opportunity to know more about these characters or know more about their relationship to one another. And then the story essentially unpauses and it picks right back up from where they met each other. And it's kind of a way of doing exposition without having somebody sit there and just explain it to you. They do it in song instead.
That's kind of interesting. I hadn't really considered it that way. Now that you say it, I was kind of running through the musical numbers of this and in RRR. That first one when Baahubali meets let me look her name up. She was one of my favorites. Avantika, if that's the one that you're talking about.
Yes.
That one, it felt a little bit that way to me, but see, it still also created a change in character, namely with Avantika in that one, You saw kind of a different version of her kind of come out of her. So to me, I mean, that carries a little bit of weight character and story-wise, but that one of all of them did feel a little bit that way, more vignette-like what you're saying. Because I know the two main ones I remember in RRR, I felt like they both served a purpose, and they were both they fit well in the scene and within that piece of the story. Like especially the part that I couldn't stop talking about when N.T. Rama Rao's character was singing while he was being flogged up there in front of everybody.
Yes.
And this one here too, I'll say, because the next musical number when they're inside the big tent bar, I'm not sure what else to call it. But after he's already lit up the whole, every pot of liquor for everybody. I mean, if you want to get popular fast, this guy knows his politics. Yeah, that one too. I mean, it served somewhat of a purpose to me since they were trying to impress all these people,
Yeah.
And what better way than to
That's
get them drunk
point.
and then go put on a great show with like the three hot ladies that work there too.
And going back to it, I felt like, so he meets Avantika at the top of the waterfall first, or at least he thinks he does, and it kind of ends up being sort of a vision that he has. Then we meet Avantika, the badass, the girl boss, the assassin lady that lures enemy soldiers into kill traps and stuff like that. She's stabbing dudes and cutting off people's heads and stuff. Then we have that second musical number between the two of them, where he's effectively trying to seduce her, I guess. And a lot of the stuff that I had written down about it is, like, it's very playful. It's played from a place of, like, romance and things like that. But the choreography during the dance itself is literally Shiva's character is tearing the clothes off of Avantika in order to restore her to kind of the image that he had of her when he scaled to the top of the waterfall, and kind of, like you said, show her that she's more, she's many things. There's a lot of different sides to her and stuff. But that scene, I think, would get butchered by Western audiences. Like, you couldn't play that in 2023 in a theater in America.
Well, it was funny to me. It did stand out to me for that reason, and I was even concerned because for as little a role, I wouldn't say little. It wasn't a starring role for Tamina Bhatia, who plays Avantika. I was digging her. Like, I thought she was one of those actors that she got me immediately, and I loved her performance again when she's in that warrior mode. And I'll be honest, I was a little concerned, and it wasn't just the song itself or what was happening, but some of the specific lyrics. I was really worried. I'm like, man, I hope she doesn't just become like more of like even a side character here and is just like rooting him on. Like, I was really wanting to see more of her badass self, and luckily more of that came back, But no, I definitely felt that a little bit in the midst of that song.
Yeah, I thought that there was I thought the same thing. First of all, I think she was my favorite performance in the whole film. I think she was the best actor. I think she played her part the best. Her ability to convey emotions and things like that without even saying stuff. She would have a look, and she could change that look while the camera was holding on her, and you could kind of just see how she's processing things. I thought that was great. I didn't see that from anybody else in this film. Not that the performances were bad, it's just I didn't see that depth. And I think that you're spot on in that I had the same thing kind of wash over me during that song sequence when he changed her back into Lady of the Waterfall version of Avantika. In that I thought they were kind of damselizing. I thought that's what was going to happen, is she was going to end up being the damsel. And like you said, luckily that doesn't happen. She kind of reverts right back into, no, I'm being part of this mission to, save Devasenya. And, she's been captured for 25 years and it's time to free her and all this other stuff. Like, she gets right back into the mode, even after her commanding officer questions her commitment to the whole thing, because she has the henna tattoo on her hand from Shiva sneaking. That's another thing. He's such a trickster. Like, he swims up in the stream and basically pretends that he's a fish biting at her hand so that he can henna tattoo her and stuff. It's very bizarre. Then
ups his game even later when he gets another animal involved in his trickery.
Yeah. He used a snake to set the pick so he could give her another tattoo on her arm.
That's awesome. The little green snake was his Kevin McHale.
But it was, he's likable. He's a likable character. But then when you go back and you kind of see not his namesake, I guess, because his name is not Baahubali, but who his father was. And he's just, he's an animal. That guy's a badass. And he's super altruistic. He's a super good person. He's doing things for all the right reasons, and he's a badass on top of all of it. And he kind of pales in comparison. So I'm really hoping they kind of lift him and elevate him. And it looked like they were going to that place when Shiva has the battle with, what's his name, Katapa?
Yeah.
I believe. Katapa. Yeah.
Yep.
Loved that character. And I felt like him and Shiva getting that battle is kind of supposed to be the kind of table setter, since they weren't going to deliver the main event.
No, absolutely. That was one of my other favorite characters or actors was Katapa, and the actor that played him. Again, I felt a little bit more behind him than just... And it helped, too. He had a couple of different dimensions to his character. Where he was situated, where he was from, his kind of mixed loyalties. I thought that was very interesting. And speaking of that scene, too, with that fight, I realized something about myself in that scene, which is I love anything that's in the rain.
Yes.
I don't care what's happening in the
Yes.
scene. I don't care if they're fighting, fucking, having a political discourse. If it's raining, I'm happy.
Yes. Absolutely. It was like watching Sin City. And I keep bringing Sin City up now. Past couple of weeks.
So that seems to be the undercurrent of a lot of these episodes is Sin City and wrestling from the 90s and early 2000s.
That's right. But
and
it was
apparently
just
80s basketball, but
yeah.
with my old school Celtics reference.
I mean, wasn't that scene in black and white? It seemed very washed out. Even if it wasn't, it just seemed very washed out.
It was pretty close. I was reading about the visual effects earlier, and they said about, I think 90% of the shots in it had some version of either visual effect or digital grade, if that's not considered just a visual effect in itself. So I mean, there was a hell of a lot of work going on with like the color, as you could see.
Yeah. I loved that scene. That was incredible. That's when the movie really started to grab me, and then all of a sudden they took us into the Wayback Machine, and I was like, "Oh man, what's gonna happen?" And then it continued to hold me, though. It didn't lose me after that. But I was definitely up for Katapa versus Shiva, and their fight didn't really deliver. I wasn't overly excited by it. It didn't last very long either. And then the next thing you knew, Katapa comes to the realization too that he's essentially Baahubali reincarnated, but what we actually know is that he's his son, and falls to his knees in reverence of him and things like that. And that's kind of the last we see of modern time until after we're done with that, hour-long flashback scene or sequence. Yeah. It's not even a scene.
Yeah, as I said, like I hadn't seen too many stories that are told this way that aren't like part of a television or a book series of some sort, I mean, to do this in just 2 movies, actually, by the end of it, I was thinking like, man, we just went through all that to now bring us back to the point we were at before. I'm like, this could be 3 movies, it feels like. I don't know the original story that well, or the ones that inspired it, I should say. I think it's more than one. But I was like, just thinking about it after going to sleep, finishing it, and I'm like, this could go a ways, Like, I'm ready for 3.
Sure. But yeah, it's just super stylish, this film, and loads of CGI. And we kind of said the same thing about RRR, in that visually, I think Rajamouli is an incredibly visual, when he's putting film together, he's incredibly visual. It's slick as hell. This movie is slick, RRR was slick, and they're both chock full of CGI. And my criticism of RRR was that the CGI is just not great a lot of the time. And this one kind of has the same problem, but I kind of forgave it a lot, and it was worse in the beginning, and over time I just kind of learned to accept it and not really worry about it too much. I mean, there's tons of really cool sets, like settings, not really sets, but like settings in this film, and that are not possible, and they have to create them somehow. And a lot of those amazing backdrops that you get, they look like these really incredible, gorgeous matte paintings. And they might be, I don't know. But they seem computer generated. And unfortunately, the places that they're trying to depict and stuff like that, it's like, that doesn't exist. We have to create it, And so getting hung up on that wasn't, it wasn't going to help me in terms of my enjoyment of the film. So I knew I had to kind of let that piece go. The only stuff that really took me out of it was like the avalanche scene.
Yeah.
The avalanche looks good when it's crashing through the trees and stuff. I thought they animated it well, and it, looked very natural. The snow kind of breaking off in sections and creating a wave that's coming down the side of a mountain. Like, it looked real. But then when you get Shiva and Avantika's characters riding, half of a hollowed out log down it, like kind of illusion it. Once you get people set against it, it lost all sense of majesty.
Oh no, absolutely. That was the thing I had noticed as well. I kind of forgot about the avalanche sequence till you mentioned it. The other one that kind of really got me was there's a piece in the battle sequence towards the end. I'm forgetting which character it is. It's one of the 2 princes are running for a sec, or they're riding on something, and the background's supposed to be going really fast. You know what I mean? Past them.
Yeah.
And that, again, it just really didn't match. Like, either one on its own might have looked fine, but like, weirdly enough, it reminded me of our last episode when you do see Tuco running through the graveyard, and then they cut between him running to that real quick, like insanely quick pan of all the tombstones, but like trying to do it together, and it was just, not a good mix. Like you could really tell what was what from that one. That being said, I did like a lot of what you were saying too, of when it's a lot of big establishing shots or backdrops, those look pretty awesome, you know?
Yeah.
Like you said, like to me, it reminded me of like those amazing like book covers you used to see when they'd have actual like illustrators go to work on like an entire thing.
Yeah. Or the establishing shot of, or shots, I should say, of Mahjmati when you're being introduced to the city for the first time, and you just kind of get a nice tour of exterior and interior sections of the city, and it's just grand and huge and complex. Like it looked like a really complex, like an Escher painting or something. It was like everything is these angles and cubes and, you know, all these decorative elements and things like that. But yeah, when you see it from far back, it looks incredible.
For sure. Yeah. So a couple of those reminded me of like, there's a great thing they did in the Lord of the Rings movies, which is mix some of that, like some matte paintings, some real photography, some miniature work. Like Minas Tirith's probably the best example. Yeah, I don't know that they went that far on this one, but yeah, some of those wider shots of the city made me feel a little bit of that, you know?
Yeah. Oh, to your point about animal stuff, I noticed that pretty much the only real animals in the film were the horses. And they rode horses a lot. Whenever they had horse riding scenes in the film, specifically during the war sections in the third act, it all seemed very epic. And then there's after Shiva rescues Devasenya, and he's riding on a horse and carriage out of Mahjmati, there's this amazing overhead shot of him riding through like a tree-lined road. And I think, like, I'm pretty sure they CG'd the horses at that point. I don't know how they would have gotten that shot. As far as crane shots or a drone shot or something like that, it seemed way out of the league of doing either of those things. And there were also multiple horse stunts. We had more horses falling down with people on them and stuff like that. And I'm always keen to see that stuff, just because you have performers, you have these horses that can be trained, and the companies and the people that can train them, and they do so for these specific reasons. And it's like, if you can make something happen for real in front of the camera, you know, and of course we don't want to see horses getting hurt for real or the riders getting hurt for real. So if you're trained and you can do this, let's do it rather than doing it on a computer, because the outcome is always going to be better. So every time there were horses on screen, I was pretty happy, just because you knew they were there. It felt like they were there.
For sure. And I mean, I don't know if there's a longer history in stunt work than horse stunts. You know what I mean? I feel like some of the very earliest movies, I mean, way back before even like the Ben-Hur that we know, people were falling off horses, you know?
Absolutely. So I've been real hot on like cinematography and stuff like that. A lot of it didn't jump out at me. I mentioned the stuff about Mahjmati and the establishing shots. Oh, one that I really liked was, and I forgot to mention this when we were talking about how badass Avantika is. When he's kind of eavesdropping on what's going on with her when she set the trap for the Balaladeva's men, they have this shot where they hold on Avantika, and she's in the distance, so she's out of focus, but they hold on her. Like, she's the center pretty much of where the camera is focused. And Shiva's hiding by a tree, and then you hear the release of an arrow, and you basically get to follow it from her position all the way until it hits the tree right next to his face. I thought that was an amazing shot, and just, it was composed really well. But yeah, like, overall, I feel as though cinematography doesn't necessarily have to make or break my feelings about a film, but it definitely helps. And this film has style. It's very stylish. There's a lot of cool stuff, a lot of cool imagery that it throws at you, a lot of cool ideas. But I wasn't blown away by tons of camera work necessarily. I was blown away by what was being shown to me, but not how it was being shown to me. There was only a handful of scenes that really kind of piqued my interest in terms of cinematography. The statue being raised, and we're looking at it from top down, and so it's kind of being raised up toward us. I thought that was cool. Dolly shot of the stones that get loaded up into the catapults. when he's essentially running along the ground and hooking, not carabiners, I guess they're like hooks. He's hooking the big tapestry to it.
Went down to Dick's Sporting Goods, got as many keychains as he could find.
He cashed in a bunch of Marlboro Miles.
No, I'm glad you brought up the cinematography, because something I don't think I would have appreciated without having seen a different movie you and I kind of talked about a little bit in our chat yesterday is composition wise. Yeah, it wasn't like too I don't know, too off the wall, too inventive necessarily. I thought it was competent though, coherent. Like, and the other part is I like the just the pacing between shots. I really got to appreciate in comparison to that other movie we were talking about, because I could feel things even in that big, frenetic, like gigantic battle at the end.
Yes.
As many things as like come out, like these different like war machines, inventions, all the highs and lows that come within this battle, I still felt it all. I had time to actually appreciate, oh man, that thing hit this. Oh wait, they're prepping up this. And even like drawing up questions like, what the hell is that about? They're just going to throw a giant blanket on him? Like, which that part at first, even like when I saw it, I'm like, well, I guess that works. It slows him down. You know what I mean? You could hit him with some more arrows maybe. But yeah, like, I really appreciated the pace of all the fights. Like it really felt like I was kind of there with it, you know? Because even besides the one, the movie we were talking about before, there was one I just saw the week before last, where like it was this insane whirling dervish kind of a thing. You know what I mean? Just like spins and kicks and elbows, and everything was kind of half hitting and half missing. But it was just so fast, and it was cutting from every angle. And I was like, I don't know what's happening right now. I feel like I'm watching a Step Up movie, not a fight. You know what I mean? And nothing against the Step Up movies. That works for those movies. But when people are actually like defending their lives, I like to kind of feel it a little bit more. Like more like a Bruce Lee fight, where like somebody gets hit, they go down, you know?
Right. And I think that's just so indicative of, I think, where our culture is in terms of attention span, you know, and things like that. And so that style of quick and punchy, just everything cuts. You don't get to look at anything for too long, because if you do, God forbid, you might get bored of it and things like that. I mean, I don't have any statistics, obviously, but the runtime of films and things like that, I'm sure, has changed drastically over the years, just to accommodate the fact that like people don't want to sit there that long anymore.
I heard statistic a while back of how quick the average cut is in an American movie, at least like the big blockbuster ones. It's something like 2.5 seconds, maybe less.
Wow. Yeah, I mean, you just get more. I mean, first of all, when you watch a film like Baahubali or you watch RRR, the duration, like, I understand that that's challenging to find that much time, but you really get an opportunity to sit there, as you were saying. I mean, you basically just made this point. You get an opportunity to sit there and just be with this film, and be with individual scenes within it and individual moments, so that you can appreciate them and kind of think about them as you're watching them, instead of desperately trying to calculate what it is you just saw at the end of an 84-minute action movie, where it's like, I'm not really sure what I saw. I don't know that I really saw anything, to be honest. Yeah. So it's just a completely different feel when you watch international film.
Well, and your problem there is we don't have 84-minute action movies over here either anymore. Ours are also about 2.5 hours now, and most of them don't have to be. Actually, I was just looking this up. Apparently, I found a site that even breaks it down by the average shot length in American movies, even by genre. This is on Stephen Follows, Film Data and Education. Oh, wow. And go figure, action movies have the most shots, just shy of 2,000 per movie. Or I should say cuts, maybe. And it says here every 4 seconds there's a new cut, usually, on average, for an American action film.
Seems long.
I know, that's what I thought.
Based on my experience, it seems long.
Yeah.
I didn't live during this time, obviously, but I love hearing that like Lawrence of Arabia, the film experience for Lawrence of Arabia was that there was an intermission. Like, I think that's cool. You know, give me a
Yeah, I don't know
4 hour
if you
film, and
if
then
you're getting near 3 hours. Sorry, I don't know if you're getting near 3 hours. I don't know why you don't. I think Tarantino did that for Hateful Eight.
did he have an intermission built in?
I think he did because I think it only played at certain theaters, but the one that I saw it at, it was just a real kind of like extended pause on a black screen, and then it came into his
Hmm.
narration catching everybody back up again, which was a little bit confusing. But
Yeah,
but then I realized after the fact that like theaters that would allow for an intermission still, that's what they had done.
right. So going back to the music, I think what I'm figuring out is that I really dig the music that's coming from these Indian films. I like it. I think it does a really good job of fitting with the tone of scenes. It never seems out of place or overly It seems like a very carefully cultivated part of the two movies that I've now seen from their production studios. It seems like a very specific, a lot of heart goes into assembling the music for these movies, and I think it shows.
Yeah, absolutely. Probably the first and for a long time only thing I knew about Indian cinema was that there was song and dance in it. And I mean,
Hmm.
if it has been a tradition for so long, it stands to rights why they would be so still so talented and so well practiced in it. You know?
Yeah, and the choreography during those scenes is great. There's some wire work and stuff like that. They're very floaty and stuff in the around the waterfall one specifically. The stunt work in here is good. There's lots of fighting and stuff like that. There's lots of dudes getting tossed in the air and landing on their necks and stuff like that. Who the hell knows how they pull that off without hurting themselves? Lots of cool stunt stuff. I think one of my favorite fight scenes actually didn't even take place during the flashback, which is strange because I really like that entire part of the movie. But when they're fighting in the mountaintop and they're in a forest that's essentially frost covered, I thought that was really cool because again, these guys are landing blows, and then when somebody falls down or their body is kind of tossed and scrapes against the side of a tree or something like that, all of these crystals of ice are falling off of everything, like all of the natural parts of the environment. And I just thought, and thick with slow-mo again, just like we were talking about with RRR. They love the slow-mo in the Indian films, and lots of big action sequences will end with slow-mo sections so you can really kind of stick the landing. So you're getting a lot of these slow motion shots of dudes flying through the air, scraping ice crystals off of trees and things like that. I thought that whole fight scene was just neat. And it was just another one of those in the list of, there's just lots of cool sets and settings that they put out for this one. I was not expecting to see snow and ice, and I don't know if that's just me stereotyping that like India's hot. I guess that's where my mind is, but it was cool to see it.
Yeah, I had to kind of check myself a little bit too, where I was like, I wasn't quite expecting that exact environment either, or that season, I guess. But then I had to remember that like the northern part of India butts right up by the Himalayas in what I think is called the Hindu Kush. So they have some pretty sizable mountains up that way. I don't know like what kind of geography this story is exactly taking place around, or if there's snow in the central and southern parts of India as well.
Yeah,
I thought it looked cool as shit though.
it was great.
I mean, like
I
some
agree.
of my favorite parts of Metroid Prime and again everything north of the wall in Game of Thrones. Second to rain. I love some snowy stuff. You know what I mean? Some snow on the ground.
Yeah.
I'm almost as happy as I am when it's raining.
And they did just a great job of that variance. You never got bored because you're not in one place for too long. I would argue that the one place that you're in for too long is kind of your beginning area. When you're first getting to meet him, it just feels like, okay, I'm ready to kind of move on and see where that character is going to go. And then the next thing you know, he scales the waterfall, and it's just nonstop, like fun, exotic, different, colorful location after the next, and it never lets you get stale.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think if you go by the hero's journey kind of theory as well, like the home base has to be a little bit a little bit more plain Jane comparatively, because once they break that threshold into the new world where they get to learn all the lessons, extend their skills, get their ass kicked a few times, fall in love, all that good stuff, you need a good comparison to where they came from.
Yeah, and you develop that wanderlust, that, I want to see what's out there kind of thing, if you portray the place where you come from as being kind of mundane. Not that there's anything wrong with it, it's just it's not exciting either.
Sure. Yeah, there's a reason that we, even though those of us who live here still go into the mountains pretty regularly, because out here on the plains, it ain't so exciting, at least not visually. The mountains get all the rain and snow. What can I tell you? Okay, that's why.
Yeah, that's why it's so damn dry. So we're obviously building up for the reincarnated, and I guess that we can explain that a little bit. So Shiva's character is the son of Baahubali, who is the brother of King Balaladeva, who is our villain in the film.
Yes.
So it's a real Simba and Scar thing going on, kind of. I guess not kind of, it is. I mean, it's his uncle. From what I understand, Shiva gets the incredible powers that he has because his birth mother, who is Balaladeva's mother. No, that's wrong. His birth mother is Balaladeva's sister-in-law, because he's married to.
Right, yes.
Because he's married to, or she's married to Balaladeva's brother.
Yes.
Is that right? It sounds right.
I think you're right. Because I think both are raised by Shivagami.
Right. And so, or is it his mom? Is it Balaladeva's mom? And Baahubali is the nephew.
He is the nephew, yes. Because
he is the nephew.
Yeah. Baahubali Senior, if you could call him that. His father died, and then his mother died in childbirth.
Right, and so
I
it's
don't know
heavily.
We get to see them much, yeah.
It's heavily implied that Balaladeva is going to end up becoming the king of Mahishmati during the flashback sequence, because essentially what they're saying is whomever essentially proves themselves to be the most worthy by killing the Kalakayan chief and things like that, they will be made king. Well, Balaladeva ends up completing that task. He kills the chief, but because Baahubali put his people first and not necessarily the violent part about doing the killing, his aunt, who is the mother of Balaladeva, ends up choosing Baahubali to be the king anyway, which of course pisses him off. So that takes us back to the cold open in the film when she... what is her name? You just said it.
Oh, Shivagami?
Yes. She is running from Balaladeva's men with Shiva, basically getting the baby out of there, and she sacrifices her own life in order to spare him, and then he ends up being found by the tribal folks, who then raise him as their own. That's where he gets his adoptive parents from. Evidently, that sacrifice is how he ends up getting imbued with these powers. He's kind of blessed at that point. So what we know, essentially, is that this whole conflict started basically with his father. What do I want to say? They were competitive brothers. They both had eyes on similar goals, but it was definitely more important to Balaladeva to become the king. This is the kind of tease of the matchup that we're all kind of wanting to see. They give it to us kind of in this form instead. It's like, well, you guys aren't going to fight each other, but you will compete. And then, of course, we get the big twist at the end.
Yes. Well, and just within that, too, the matchup you're talking about between, Balaladeva and Shivudu, with Baahubali, you can get a feel for who those guys were pretty early on. But that being said, they still surprised me. I could kind of feel, okay, this would be more likely to take a kind of action like this. But the specificity, especially within that last battle scene, a lot of really cool choices in like how to reveal more character about both of these guys. Even a pretty, what I thought was kind of a nice subtle touch with Baahubali Senior. when it seems as though that he's not going to be the next heir, you know what I mean, to the throne.
Yeah.
Even like for a hot sec, he looks pretty humble and is willing to accept Balaladeva, since he was the one that ended up achieving the main goal and all that.
Yeah.
So yeah, like it shows a pretty pious guy, which I'm like, hell. And you know, that's usually the guy that you would want to lead, you know. Not for too long though, because those are also the guys that tend to get assassinated. But what do you want?
Lo and behold. And I mean, real quick, just on the style thing, or that this is actually under my joy one. Balaladeva's got all the fun toys, doesn't he? I mean, he's got that enormous Morning Star.
Dude. The one I don't know how I never saw it before was his fucking like lawnmower thing.
Yes.
That big, like, I don't know if it was made of bone or what. I don't know how it was spinning. If the horses were also performing that, but that was like, I wanted to just stand up at that point and just start clapping. Yeah. That was amazing.
Yeah, his buzzsaw like carriage thing.
Yes.
Or chariot. It was more like a chariot than a carriage, I guess. Just awesome. Like, he gets all the fun tools, and then of course you're seeing the inverse of that, which would be Baahubali having to do it just kind of like, you know, pulling up his bootstraps and just kind of doing it with his bare hands or a spear, maybe. But then on the other side of the battlefield, you have Balaladeva with this, I mean, incredibly technically advanced Morning Star that can retract its chain and stuff and become more of a maul and then be extended out. And then, of course, he's got this, as you stated, the lawnmower chariot thing. And again, it just kind of reminds me of like the John Henry story up against the steam engine. You know, you know, can Baahubali defeat the enemy in the same way that Balaladeva can? You know, given that he's only allowed to use his natural gifts, but this guy's got all the technology in the world.
Like Balaladeva was the Iron Man if they were like, you know, the Iron Man and Cap kind of a combo. You're like, bro, I'm just using it. I got a shield and I'm pretty strong and fast. You know, like you have everything that anybody's ever thought of over here.
Yep. And some that they didn't.
Yeah.
So what it all kind of leads up to, and I mean, I feel like we're kind of hitting all the notes. I don't know. Like if you have things that you haven't brought up yet, I want to give you the floor to make sure that you do, because I feel like I'm kind of reaching the end of my notes, and I mean, I've never seen us get through an episode this fast. Not that it's a bad
honestly,
thing.
No. I think we hit about everything that I had thought of. So. Okay.
So what I wanted to just make sure to bring up, again, and you know, I'm sorry, we're over an hour into this. SSP is a spoilerific show. I should have said it from the top, but this movie came out in 2015, so I feel like we're okay. So we've all been following the plight of Katapa since the beginning. He's a badass swordsman. He's an incredibly loyal character. He is committed to Devasenya and the faction of people that are trying to free her. He is in league with them. However, he's also been a slave to Balaladeva and the king of Majmati specifically for many, many years, and is kind of acting as a double agent, but at the same time is unwilling to just kind of full-blown go anarchy against the king. And so, I mean, he even offers at one point, he basically tells Devasenya, all you have to do is say so, and I'll break that chain and get you out of here. But what we come to find out so he's this incredibly loyal guy, and he falls to his knees in reverence of Baahubali reincarnated, essentially. And what we come to find out from the original story is that when Baahubali is named king over Balaladeva after the battle with the Kalakayans, there's some stretch of time that obviously has to take place for Baahubali to sire a son, which I'm not really sure. Or was it implied that already had happened? Did he already have the son when that battle took place?
I don't think so, because I don't recall seeing any younger version of Devasena.
And I didn't either. And I guess it also would be implied that he's essentially a prince at this point, but he couldn't have been if his father wasn't the king yet. And so what we find out is Katapa, who is incredibly loyal to Baahubali, and as I said, is in reverence of the fact that Shiva is essentially the reincarnated version of him. We find out that he is the one that betrayed Baahubali and stabbed him in the back and murdered him. It was literally like the last thing we saw before the end credit kind of stinger hits, and then it leaves you basically with, part 2's coming soon, sorry, and that's kind of what they leave you with.
Join us next time on
Right.
Baahubali.
And so I thought, just to give it a wrap, I guess. It started slow. The cold open, I wasn't really sure what I was dealing with. The very obvious green screens and the CG, I was kind of out at first, and then it slowly started to capture me and bring me back in. Avantika, the character work and how well the performance was from Tamana Bhatia. She did a great job. She started to pull me back in. The fantastical locations and sets and things like that, and just the overall badassery that they provide in these action films from India. They give you all the cool weapons and fighting and choreography, and they do it in very cool settings and places. The flashback sequence was great in order to fill in some of the backstory, and then getting that twist at the end that I absolutely did not see coming. All it has me doing is I'm on tenterhooks to see what happens. Like I'm excited to see what happens in Baahubali 2, and to finally get that main event fight between Balaladeva and Shiva.
Absolutely, man. I'm very much ready for it. This felt like the just to go to the wrestling pool one more time, this felt almost like the Royal Rumble. You know what I mean? Like, where the pieces are, who's about to clash next, and lots to move forward. One last thing too, I think I said something similar to this on our last 2 episodes I've been on, but I always appreciate a movie that can feel, like you said, like somewhere between fable, folklore, mythic, all that kind of stuff. And this one definitely had that, and reminders of different things, even between like Moses and Hamlet and all sorts of other great legends and such. But also, again, felt totally its own, which is another thing I super appreciate. When you can hit some familiar buttons, but then also show me some things I never even thought of, like some of those things we mentioned in that last battle. So I applaud this movie for that, if anything else.
Absolutely. And I think that another stance that I just want to take on this, I know that I've already given my kind of final words, is just for anybody out there who's kind of on the fence, I guess. I just think if you're looking for entertainment in film, there's obviously plenty of it coming from America. But damn, are there a lot of studios coming from other countries that just are churning out some really great stuff. And I mean, the opportunities are out there for you to find, incredible media that doesn't necessarily come from America. And I think a lot of the time the hang up comes in like the language thing or the culture thing. I mean, I've been finding a lot of fun with the culture thing because I don't know a lot about Indian culture. And so a lot of the time, some of the stuff that might be allegory to them or parables and things like that don't necessarily read that way to me. So they just seem like badass stories, and badass stories that I didn't grow up with and I wasn't taught in school. And so I would urge people to, try some more international cinema. I think India is killing it. RRR is incredible. This movie was really good. I enjoyed it, and sets up the sequel really well. And evidently Baahubali 2 is the highest grossing Indian film of all time. So I'm assuming it's a blockbuster. So I urge people to kind of get past that thing. If it's a subtitle thing, just put the dub version on and deal with the voice acting, and hopefully you get a good one. But yeah, I think people need to kind of get over it.
Absolutely. And I feel like enough people now either watch some version of anime, and if you think honestly that much reading during your entertainment, how much time do you spend reading things on your phone or your computer through most of the day? You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Here you get to do some of that and get whisked away to a world that you've maybe never been a part of, and get told a great story. And there's song and dance. Come on, in the rain.
And there's song and dance.
That doesn't happen. There's a fight in the rain, but that's good enough.
Hopefully in the sequel there's a song and dance in the rain.
Oh, one can only hope.
Yeah, because that will placate both of our needs in these films.
5 stars immediately.
6 if it's in the Tokyo Dome.
That was good.
So with that, sir, yeah, I think that's all I've got to say. It's great. Go see it. It's a great table setter for the second one. I'm excited for the second one.
Absolutely. Ready for round 2, baby.
All right, Code. Well, thank you very much for joining me again this week. I very much appreciate having you on.
Oh, my pleasure, man. Always great to talk to you, and great excuse to watch some very interesting new to me movies. So thanks again for having me on, man.
Yeah, of course. And once again, folks, I just want to hit these things again. Please engage with us. We want it. I need it. I need you to email me. I need you to send me messages on Facebook or on Twitter or something like that and let me know, hey, if you like these kinds of films, I really think you should watch this. Or it would be cool if you did a ranking episode of this director's body of work. Something. I want to hear from you. I want to know how you think we're doing, and I want to know where you think we should be going with the films that we're watching and talking about. So find me and the rest of the gang at screensermonpod@gmail.com. You can find me on Twitter and Instagram and TikTok and YouTube at Screen Sermon. And you can find me on Facebook just by searching for the Screen Sermon Podcast. Our episodes drop every Sunday. Right now we're on Spotify and YouTube. We will branch out more and hit some other platforms in the future. We just haven't done that just yet. So yeah, we want to hear from you. ScreenSermonPod@gmail.com and all of the social medias. Just search for us. Interact with us. Let's get some conversations started. Let's get some Q&A going. Let's get some suggestions. I'm down for all of it. And in the meantime, I'm very much looking forward to bringing you another episode next week.